Who is Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, and why should we know more about him? Hey fam, on this edition of God Dreamers, we're taking some time to honor a man that I believe is a true God dreamer, who spent all of his life being God's vessel for positive change in the Black and world community. Unfortunately, most of this generation has never heard of him. Our guest, aspiring film director Michael Wells, shares a little about the significance of the life of Dr. Mays and the upcoming projects he and his team are working on to bring about greater awareness of this pioneer. But before we get into the discussion, please check out this teaser video his team has produced.
I want to take this opportunity to thank, commend, and urge our support for the preservation of the landmarks, the birth home, and the history and legacy of Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays.
It is not your environment.
It is you. The quality of your mind, the integrity of your soul, and the determination of your will that will decide your future and shape your life.
Lord knows that those Black men, all of us needed that encouragement and that inspiration that he imparted.
He had all of his students, the ones that he thought had leadership potential, like Martin Luther King, like Maynard Jackson. He got them summer jobs in a tobacco field. Now that's hell. You can't stand up. There's a net about that high. And so you're crawling in the dirt in the Connecticut sun in June, July, and August. He really felt that in order to be a leader, you had to understand the plight of the ordinary man.
Every man and woman is born into the world to do something unique and something distinctive. And if he or she does not do it, it will never be done.
Well, I think it's important that we as a people understand who he was and the contributions that he made to our well-being. We should know more about an historical figure such as Dr. Mays, who was one of the most significant Black men in our history.
Whenever I had a difficult decision in the field of education or social justice or human rights, I would call Dr. Mays, and often he would come to the White House.
And he was an icon and important to the world, not just the kids at Morehouse.
He was always a leader seeking to get equality for Black people especially, but for the larger issue of social justice.
However hard the road, however difficult today, tomorrow things will be better. Tomorrow may not be better, but we must believe that it will be.
He ended up, leading a lot of folks to where we are today, to have this Black excellence and this inclusivity in business and religion and in, government.
This was a man who pulled himself up and an entire generation of Black folks that he taught, nurtured, and set an example for.
Dr. Mays really laid it all on the line for future generations. And so, we judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. Well, Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays produced a lot of good fruit.
We today stand on the shoulders of our predecessors who have gone before us. We, as their successors, must catch the torch of freedom and liberty passed on to us by our ancestors. We cannot lose in this battle.
The bravery of this man, the courage of this man inspired so many others. I mean, we know about Martin Luther King Jr., but that's just one of so many people. And there's not a better role model than a Benjamin E. Mays for men and women. Dr. Mays represents the best, I think, that humanity has.
Let's continue the legacy
and build a better tomorrow together. Join us.
I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity's in it.
What's up, fam? Welcome to another edition of God Dreamers. Today on God Dreamers, my special guest, Michael Wells, and I are going back into time to discuss a historical figure that, unfortunately, not many people these days know much about, which is a shame. He was a pioneer civil rights leader, a pastor, teacher, and in my humble opinion, a profound God dreamer at all fronts. This man is the Honorable Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. And some of you are like, who's that? Yeah, but we're going to talk more about that so you will know and be educated on his life and some of the great things that he's done. Here to share a little more about this man and on the special project that he's working on is film director Michael Wells. Michael Wells, welcome to God Dreamers, man. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for
man. So Michael Wells, you are a profound film director.
Okay, I'll take that.
I like the word profound. Anyway, share a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I've been working, doing filmmaking, documentary filmmaking in particular for decades now. I've been worked with PBS before, and I've done a few projects, minor projects. This is definitely one of the larger ones that I've worked with. And I guess it kind of just kind of pulled me in the whole subject matter. But I really like to do projects that make you think, that make us look at ourselves introspectively, kind of, and society around us as a whole, and kind of look at ways to figure out why we do some of the things that we do, and then maybe kind of help change things. I mean, that's always been a goal of mine, is to do something that touches people's lives. And I think this project definitely spoke to me, when we had the opportunity to participate in it.
Yeah. Well, I want to share this a little about Michael. Michael, we met, oh gosh, I don't know, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah,
20 years ago. So Michael is a I admire him greatly because he's really a talented individual. He's the one that actually taught me how to edit back in the day. He may not remember that, but he taught me how to edit because I was horrible. And he's kind of taught me about lighting and shooting and all that good stuff, man. I mean, so he's a powerhouse. And so he may come across very humble, but I admire his work. I admire some of the things that he's done. And so I'm just so grateful that we've had this opportunity to work on this project. And actually I'm also working on this project as well. So thank you, Mike, for just helping me out back in the day, man. So much appreciated.
No problem. You're a great student, man.
So let's talk about Dr. Mays.
Okay.
So Dr. Mays, like I said before, it was and the weird thing about it, I didn't know before this project, I saw his name pop up occasionally. Like we live in the Metro Atlanta area, and so his name pops up occasionally on maybe street names or schools and things of that nature. But beyond that, I didn't know much about this man. And it's a shame because as we were learning more and more about him, it's like, wow, this guy is done some wonderful things, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't know about it. But what are your thoughts about that? I mean, with this working on this project, I mean, do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. I think wonderful is, I mean, saying that he's done a lot of wonderful things. I mean, that's just putting it mildly, I think, because
Yeah.
I mean, he's a giant. To me, when I think about it, Atlanta, being, you know how everyone says Atlanta's the black Mecca, and there's this a lot of upward mobility for African Americans here. I think he was probably one of the people that was instrumental in that, in Atlanta becoming the Atlanta that we know today. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I mean, when you think about it, when you think about Atlanta, everyone thinks about MLK, but I mean, and
Yeah.
I don't want to jump ahead in the conversation, but I mean, without Dr. Mays, there wouldn't be any. I mean, there very, very, very likely wouldn't be the MLK that we know. You know, so I mean,
That's
he
true.
really set the stage for Atlanta becoming what it is today, which is one of the major cities in the United States, if not, you know, an international city itself. I mean, the people that were responsible for bringing the Olympics here, he was the person that, you know, shepherded them in their early careers, and, you know, helped them out, and guided them. You know, people like Maynard Jackson, the first black mayor in Atlanta, he was his mentor. So I mean, there's so many people's lives that he touched, and those people went on to touch so many other people's lives. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. It kind of blows your mind.
Yeah, it does. Um, you know, because he came from very, very humble, you know, background. I mean, he grew up, I think, in Greenwood, South Carolina. Well, I
Right.
actually was outside of Greenwood, South Carolina. But I mean, he grew up basically as his parents were sharecroppers, and he grew up picking cotton. And the weird thing about it is that he just had this. I think he was the youngest of all of his siblings, and he had this strong desire early on
Yeah.
to want to go beyond just being a, you know, a sharecropper, and even to against his desires of his father. But he
Yeah.
had that fire in him early on. I think, and it was an incident. I mean, you want to share a little bit about that incident that in the book that he wrote that kind of sparked his desire to want to do more and be more than just settle for living that kind of farmer's lifestyle.
You mean that the first memory that we
Yeah, the
talked?
first memory. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, which is, I mean, even that thought of it itself. I mean, the first thing that sticks out in that he talks about, the first memory. So the first significant thing in his whole life was being confronted by this angry mob. And let me, I guess, go back. If you give me a second, I can explain a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah,
about
that's good. Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
the
go ahead.
background. So, and it's kind of funny because it parallels some situations that are still relevant today. But at the time, there was immense voter suppression, particularly in the African American population there. Uh,
Mhm.
it was
It's
in
Reconstruction to
Yeah,
Reconstruction
it was
period. Yeah.
after Reconstruction, and
Mhm.
they had, you know, blacks had gotten the right to vote, and there were some blacks in the legislature, especially from the South, because of the population. The black population was so heavy there and dense. So there have been some black legislators that had begun to be elected, but they began changing laws to in order to limit their ability to serve in Congress and other things, and to limit the black vote. So they had just changed the, I believe the constitution of that state, of the state of South Carolina, to enact some kind of really harsh kind of, well, I don't know if harsh is the right word, but very limiting laws that limited the ability of blacks to vote. And there was an incident where there was one gentleman, a white gentleman that was at the time he was a Republican, and he was a Republican candidate, and he was registering blacks to vote, or he was documenting the
Mhm.
voter suppression. Um, so, just to kind of speed up the story, it his effort led to a confrontation at a local grocer where the voting was taking place at. Um, the man that he was collecting statements from blacks that were denied the right to vote. Um, he was confronted by men that weren't. I think I can't remember the name of the guy, but who actually confronted him. But he was a local person that was upset about him, stirring the pot or going against what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Him and his friends, they confronted him, and it turned into well, he ended up, the guy that confronted him, that confronted the gentleman that was trying to register the blacks, he ended up getting killed during the altercation. He ended up getting shot, and the accounts have different information. Some say that it was a black man that shot him. Some say that he was shot by one of his friends, but he was the one that initiated this confrontation, this fight that broke out. And I think he was beating the white gentleman that was trying to register the black voters or getting their information.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to stop him, he ended up getting shot. Apparently somebody shot him. So it turned into a huge riot called the Phoenix riots. And during those Phoenix riots, they, I think over the next, weekend, I think it was 2 or 3 days, days span, but thousands of whites gathered from around the countryside, and they were essentially hunting down blacks, terrorizing them and killing them. So dozens of blacks ended up getting murdered. But this is Dr. Mays' first memory. So he and his father were on the porch of their house,
Mm-hmm.
outside, and several of the posse that was looking for blacks to basically kill, that were involved in this situation that happened. They rode up to them and they confronted his father, made his father take off his hat, bow down, and basically say that he wouldn't vote, and that he was recognized that he was inferior, etc. And Dr. Mays witnessed this, and that moment and that event, along with other things, but that is the catalyst that really sparked his desire to prove his worth, his value, because he knew, in God's sight, he understood what his purpose was and why he was put on earth, and that those events cemented that desire and passion in him.
Yeah, it's fascinating that that, along with various other things that he experienced and saw growing up, just helped to mold and shaped him to want to do more, to be more, and really just get out. I guess change the mindset of how Black people were viewed back in those days. Viewed as not being smart, being socially unfit. And so all those things, that kind of all these stereotypes that African Americans and Black folks experienced back in those days, he had a desire to change that image, and so strongly to the point where it led to some contention with he and his dad. But he pursued. He went on to I guess school. I mean, I think the other thing that started him, that he I think he brought a sermon to his church at the time, and found out that he could speak, and he was an orator, and so that kind of inspired him to say, hey. And I think his teachers and so forth say, hey, this guy is special. He needs to, he's going to do great things. And so that's how he pursued his education, from going to schools there, going out, going to a school. Because back in those days, a lot of schools for African Americans only went up to, I think, mid school, elementary school. And then after that, there was no high school or anything like that. So you had to kind of travel to go to a high school or get your higher. In those days, I was called higher ed.
Right.
But he had to travel outside his town to go to school, and eventually, went, I think, to Virginia, I believe, and then later on up to Boston, or no, Maine, to go to college there, and then from there, he went on to get his PhD at Chicago, and then started teaching from that point on. So it's and that was not an easy task to do back in those days.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I mean, like when we talked about well, the director of the historic site, Chris, how he explained how his family, a lot of people in that community they couldn't see beyond, the town. I think it was Epworth is where they were.
Epworth, yeah.
Epworth and Greenwood County. Um, he's just saying a lot of blacks just didn't see beyond that. I mean, everyone was, you either became a sharecropper, you became, if you were lucky, you became a teacher at the local school. That was kind of like the pinnacle of achievement or your career, and that was very rare. Apparently, there weren't a lot of those. A lot of teachers. I mean, for the most part, you were expected to become a farmer, or if there were some people that were preachers as well. So preacher, farmer, teacher. Well, those were the local teacher, I should say. Even that, those were the pretty much that was the spectrum of what you were expected to become. And in the book, he talks about how I mean, he really digs into, he paints a real vivid picture of what life was like back then, and how you couldn't, the blacks, you weren't supposed to address another black person as Mr. or Mrs., especially in the presence of a white person, because that was showing deference or putting the African American or the black person on a pedestal. So they did a lot of things. That the system of Jim Crow that he grew up in, it really was designed to make them think that they were not, that they were inferior, and they were not as intelligent, or they didn't have as much to contribute to society as anyone else. And Dr. Mays didn't believe that. That's why, he talks about in the book, how he used to go out in the field. He would sneak away when he was, or take breaks from his work, and he would, tie the mule up, and he would go in the woods like almost daily and pray that God would make a way for him to become something bigger than what his environment was telling him he could be. He always had this desire and this dream to be something more and to do more. And like you said, he was the ultimate God dreamer in some aspects of that, because he defied what every expectation was for him and what he could be.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, that is so true. He against all odds, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, if you think about it, back in those days, it was so difficult. I mean, because people lost their lives, especially blacks in those days, they lost their lives if that during that time where, if they, the whites at that time thought you're trying to become educated, that was a threat. And so a lot of people lost their lives. You had to be secretive about it, but yet and still, he went out of his way to go to school, and against all odds with his father, because his father was old school. His father was like, the funny thing about it is that, a lot of the old school farmers thought that education ruined people.
Yeah, that's true.
And I can understand where that came from, but his father really felt early on that education was not good. It just kind of corrupted your character, your integrity. It just corrupted you. And so his father was like, man, I'm totally against you going to school. You need to be on the farm and farm just like everybody else. But Dr. Mays was like, no. So I can only imagine in that household how contentious that could have been, because your dad telling you, hey, what you're trying to achieve it's not really good. He
was dead set against it, and it led to a lot of difficult moments. Apparently, I mean, in the book he talks about his house he didn't grow up in his environment was not a very nurturing or pleasant environment from that aspect. Now his mom and his older sister, he really said that they were his support system in terms of becoming what he wanted to become, and they really encouraged him. But I mean, his father was apparently, it was just like, it was a complete clash in that household. And I mean, he talks about vividly, he talks about how, contentious and at times, abusive, that the relationship would become.
Yeah. So So you mentioned this, some of the things that he did later on in his life, but why should what is so important, or why should people want to know more about him? Today.
I think he sets an example, not just for African Americans, but for everyone, for anyone that um, believes in their worth, their value, and what God has instilled in them, their abilities. He was someone that walked the walk. He talked the talk, but he also walked the walk. So he was very adamant about that. Um, I think that was one of the things that he talked about and um, spoke uh, spoke about quite often is individuals that you can't say one thing and then turn around and live your life in a different way. And he was very adamant about that, about trying to get America itself to live up to its potential. So he believed very much uh, in the power of he very much believed he lived his spirituality wholeheartedly. So he uh, believed in the teachings of Christ and Christ's walk and his work, and the idea that we're supposed to love one another, we're supposed to treat one another a certain way, and that you can't be a Christian and do otherwise. You can't
be a racist.
Yeah, you can't. And he called people to, like, I was just listening to his Evanston sermon, which is one of his most powerful sermons. It was delivered in 1954, and he talks about religion and the purpose of religion and how it has always broken the mores and I think that was the exact word he used, breaking the mores, which, when you think about it, a more being a pattern that it's and it's really profound. His speeches, if you listen to him and break them down, because he really would layer a lot of information into his speeches, a lot of detail. Like in one, he talks about he goes through every uh, uprising in America from the every black uprising in America, where he talks about it was the commemoration of the Emancipation Proclamation, and he talks about every time blacks had tried to achieve freedom in America, from Denmark Vesey to uh, every protest, every uprising, and he just kind of lays it out that blacks had, since the beginning, since the time that they had been brought to the shores of America, had been struggling for emancipation, and they achieved it. Well, it was through the Emancipation Proclamation. There was a declaration of that independence, but he talked about how there was still growth that had to be done in that next 100 years, and everything that blacks still had to go through Jim Crow. So I mean, his speeches they're amazing if you listen to him. But like I'm saying, he talks about breaking the mores and the patterns, and again, uh, a more is two different similar patterns, but slightly different, that are on top of each other. So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the pattern of, I guess you could say, the pattern of Black America and White America on top of creating this coming together, but it wasn't what it needed to be. And he was saying that it needed to be, religion was the key to, and being true to your religion and your religious principles was the key to breaking the patterns that were the distorted patterns that were established and present in society at the time. So it's to me, it's deep. I think it's deep. So.
Yeah, I mean, and and he was definitely. I mean, he was a quote monster.
Yeah,
I mean, he
yeah,
has so many quotes
and good
about
ones.
some really good ones that that make you think. I mean, and that was just a part of him, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. He I think I when I think about him, I think you know his desire. He was he was not necessarily pro black,
right.
although his energies were to empower people of color. He was pro people. His desire was to see a world where people were judged, based on their character. Same things that MLK talked about.
Yeah,
I think MLK took it from Dr. Mays, but
yeah,
he wanted to see a world where people were based on their character, on their integrity, not on foolish things like skin color, which has no, has no, it has no reference or has no uh, power to change a person, right? The person is with has the power within them to change. It's totally independent of your complexion. It's totally independent of your features and so forth. And so he saw a world where people are one in the eyes of God. And
yeah,
that's what he was trying to achieve throughout his life. But I love the way the things that he did, because he had opportunities to teach, like at Howard University at first, and then he went on to Morehouse College. So you want to share a little about, the Morehouse experience? Because when he came into Morehouse College, it's not like the college that it is today.
right.
It was a very institute. It was a struggling institute that almost didn't survive.
Yeah,
But you want to share a little bit about his tenure at Morehouse College? And I think it
sure.
started like late 40s up to, I think, the late 60s when he was there.
Yeah, yeah. I know when he came to Morehouse, like you said, Morehouse was struggling. It was a small private college or institution that was in having some financial difficulties. And he came in and he turned the school around. He brought in top-notch faculty. He was a great recruiter. From everything we've heard about him, he had a way of really imbuing his passion and his drive and desire in people. And people, I think, wanted to follow him because they saw his not only his character, but they saw his passion and his enthusiasm and his belief in what he was, what he was doing. So he was able to really bring in some top notch professors and instructors, to really boost up the profile of Morehouse. But he was also able to bring in more funding for the school because the school again was struggling, and he had to make some tough decisions when he first came in there, and he had to kind of be tough and um, do things. He had to, with it being with it being a minority school, and a lot of people didn't have a lot to give or a lot of money, but he did come in and he encouraged or he worked with people, but he made sure that people would um, pay their tuition and the monies that they were required to pay for their education. But then he also, on top of that, went out and brought in all kinds of money for the school from places that you wouldn't even imagine. He
Yeah.
established relationships with a lot of people, a lot of organizations, uh, and brought them on board because they believed in his passion. They believed in what he was trying to do. And some people, like I'm sure we'll talk about he and Margaret Mitchell's relationship and how he.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Why not? All
Yeah,
right.
'cause, the other funny thing too is that on campus he had a nickname. They used to call him Buck Benny.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
accounted for every buck
Exactly.
on
Yeah.
campus.
Yeah. He was no joke apparently. So, but I mean, it's what he did, what it took, and he
Yeah.
made Morehouse into what it is today. He created that whole Morehouse persona of the Morehouse man and the mystique and that sense of excellence. Because he apparently, from everything I hear, he was no nonsense when it came to excellence and doing what you needed to do. He was very much about business and handling your business, but it seemed like he did it with a very calm, graceful gentleness too. So that was kind of cool that he wasn't really a hard nosed or hard edged kind of blunt instrument. I mean, he was more like a surgeon, apparently
Yeah,
in the way he.
precise.
Yeah, exactly. So it's amazing, but he was able to do things like I said, like we were talking about, getting Margaret Mitchell to basically fund. I don't. I think it's. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it in the hundreds of dollars? I know it's a lot.
It was a lot of money.
A
Yeah,
lot of yeah, a lot
because
of
I think.
doctors.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead. What were you
No, I
gonna
was
say?
saying, yeah, it was a lot of money. Yeah, and it was in the way he went about it was very stealth because I think her husband at the time was
Yeah,
not it was totally against it, but she somehow was able to fund it, and nobody knew about it until later on in life, right? I think after she
right.
had passed away and after Dr. Mays
That was part
passed
of
away, I
their
think it came to
that was
light.
part of
Yeah,
their agreement. He,
yeah,
wasn't supposed to tell anyone. Um, but yeah, a lot of the young black doctors that came out of Mahatma and is it not Mahatma? I'm sorry, I said that wrong. But a lot of the black doctors that came out of a lot of the schools at that time, they were their education was funded by Margaret Mitchell. She and the story with her, it's a real interesting story. But just to recap it really quick, he had been writing to her for years with no luck, no response, and they don't really know if it was her or her husband, because I think her husband was the one that kind of filtered her. The mail would come through
hmm
him, to go to her, but there was no response for years. But apparently, maybe she did know something about it, but he didn't have any luck. But he was persistent, so he kept writing to her, asking for her support for the school. Um, but it wasn't until, I believe, a good friend of hers, very close friend of hers, who was a close friend of her family, a black woman that was a worker, a servant in their house, was kind of, I guess you would maybe say her nanny. She's the woman that helped raise her, and took care of her, became sick, became ill, and Margaret Mitchell was calling all around town trying to get her into a hospital, get her seen, get someone to care for her, and she couldn't get anyone to care for her because she was black, because the woman was black, and it really kind of didn't sit well with her. I can't remember the exact details. If the woman, I know she suffered from illness for a while. I don't know if she passed away because of the lack of care, or how exactly um, things played out with her
yeah,
particular story. But I know that the situation um, spoke to Margaret Mitchell so much, and she saw that there was such a need for black doctors, that she, from that point on, she funded doctors, countless doctors, black doctors, to get an education, so that they could work and help care for patients that needed help. So a lot of our um, early doctors were a result of Dr. Mays's influence, playing out in that, um, playing out in society. So in his work and effort behind the scenes, I mean, he was constantly working behind the scenes. That was the thing. He was really a humble person. I think that's part of why
yeah,
we don't really know as much about him, or why his name isn't a household name, these days, like some others are, because he just did the work. He didn't look for the limelight. He didn't look for the glamour or the accolades. He did the work, you know.
yeah. I think that's a good um, more to the story of not looking for fame and glory, but just do the work, right? I
Yeah,
mean, so yeah, that's fascinating that he did that. um and even the other fascinating thing too, you want to talk about is his relationship with MLK, because MLK came into Morehouse um really young, because I think it was World War II, right? World War II was kind of pulled a lot of the college age African American males off to the war.
yeah,
And so Morehouse was kind of suffering because they didn't have hardly any students there. And so Dr. Mays led this charge to start recruiting high school students that were, doing well, get them involved into the college early. And MLK was one of them. You want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, because they were ready to shut the doors literally
Yeah,
on
yeah.
school because they were that low on enrollment, and they were struggling to that point, and he was like, no, we're not going to shut the school. So he came up with this brilliant idea of tapping into the high school students that had potential in the area, and that's how he ran into and found Martin Luther King Jr. He was one of the students that at the age of 15 that Dr. Mays recruited from Morehouse, one of the bright and upcoming young men that he brought into Morehouse, along with, Maynard Jackson was another one of those bright students. But yeah, he recruited Martin Luther King. And the way that the story goes is Martin Luther King used to wait for, so Dr. Mays, a lot of the people that we talked to with this project always talked about, one of the big things you remember, Todd, that everybody would talk about was chapel. And every Tuesday, Dr. Mays would be there for chapel, and he would speak to the students. And, they talked about all the great speakers that would be there from all over the country or even the world, that would talk to the students, and the insight and the all of the insight that these students would learn from these speakers, that would come and talk to them. So, but every Tuesday at chapel was the day for Dr. Mays to be there. And they say he never missed a Tuesday. He was always there, no matter what his schedule was. He was always made sure he was there to speak to the students. And Dr. King was there afterwards, waiting for him after he finished speaking to follow him to his office, and would talk to him the whole while we're walking back. And Dr. King, Martin King at the time, young Martin King, would just soak in information from him and just pick his brain. And the people that we talked to said, if you saw or heard Dr. Martin Luther King speak, you were looking at the influence of Dr. Mays, because he patterned himself after Dr. Mays to that extent. And it's even documented that he was not even planning to become a minister when he went there. I think he wanted to become a lawyer, right? I think something like that.
I think so.
Yeah. So and when you think about that, he's from a family of ministers, right? His dad is a minister, but he didn't want to go into ministry. That wasn't where his passion or his desire was, but after he met Dr. Mays, and Dr. Mays was a different kind of minister, I think, and that maybe what appealed to him, because Dr. Mays was kind of he was different. He was a minister cut from a different mold, because he just lived things differently. He saw things differently. He was a very intelligent, super hyper intelligent man.
Hands-on.
We didn't talk about that, because he was valedictorian, of his class. In one of the schools he graduated from, he was always in honors, honor societies. I think he spoke Greek, didn't he? He did biblical translations. In one of his first book was The Negro Church, and I think that, I can't remember exactly, he was recruited for that. He was recruited for that project because he was one of the few blacks that could translate the Bible. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. So and I think when if I'm not mistaken, his first teaching assignment was, he was a calculus teacher at Morehouse, so he taught math. So this man was really smart beyond. He was by no means, he was not a dummy at all. He was super intelligent. Yeah. So he was just, and he was an athlete on top of that, right? Because he was a football player and a baseball player. Yeah. So he was just all around. He was Superman, basically. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
and there was a story about him that when he was younger, he and his brother were like the fastest cotton pickers in that region. So everything to him was like a competition. And he excelled at everything, whether it was something that he wanted to do or he didn't want to do, he excelled at it. So that's the other fascinating thing about him as well.
And that's the thing that he taught his students. He was like, do your best. And that's one of his quotes, like you're saying, yeah, all these quotes, I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to try and say the quote exactly, but one of his quotes is, do everything as best you can. Do basically, that's in a nutshell. That's my abbreviation of what his quote is. But his mantra was, don't do anything. Just if you're gonna do it to the best of your abilities, and shine at what you're gonna do. Just don't be mediocre. And he didn't settle for mediocrity in his students either. I mean, he really, the students said that he would stay on top of them. They knew that they had to, even like I can't remember who it was. Who was it that was it Dr. Satcher, David Satcher, was saying that Dr. Mays, they would go out and protest, and Dr. Mays would actually sometimes come and pick them up, if they had been, in jail or gotten, arrested. He would come get them out, and he was really supportive of that whole movement. But he would also make sure that if their studies were most important. So Dr. Satcher was saying that, yeah, even if they were protesting, they still had to do their homework. So they would be in their books, studying, so they knew that there was no excuse. There was no excuse, protesting or not, fighting for freedom or not. You still needed to get your grades.
Get your work done. Because he said, basically, he said, yeah, your parents sent you to come to school to do school, not to go protest, but to do school. You can protest, but you got to take care of your school and first. I found some of these quotes. I'm gonna share a little bit of them right here. So, like, this is one quote that he did. He says, "It is not your environment; it is you. The quality of your mind, the integrity of your soul, and the determination of your will that will decide your future and shape your life." And another one, he says, "Whatever you do, strive to do it so well that no man living and no man dead and no man yet to be born could do it any better."
Exactly.
Oh man, he's got some good stuff, man. He's got some good stuff. So let's fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about this project that you've been working on. You along with Ron Wortham, myself, and a few others. Let's talk about that. Over a year ago, we started working on this project, and Sally Warner was pretty much the executive producer of this project. But you want to share a little about the museum and some of the other things that are going on?
Sure. Yeah. So in Greenwood County, they have the Gleams Benjamin E. Mays Historic Preservation Site, and it consists of his birth home and one of two schools that were in that county at the time. It's not the exact one that he went to, but it's the exact same style and design as the school he went to. So it has his birth home, the school, and then it has a museum that houses like hundreds of photos of him, all of his literature, his books, and countless other information and artifacts from his life. And it's a really interesting, it's a fascinating place to go to and just kind of absorb kind of his essence and understand a lot more about him. So the site has been in operation for, I think, 5 years now, right, Todd? I think it's roughly 5 years.
Yeah.
But
time period.
Yeah, and they have a foundation, but because he's not as well known, like we talked about, he was kind of a quiet force of nature. Not many people know about him. So the historic site has been working and struggling, I guess, kind of to really get their footing and get the finances available that they need to operate on a consistent basis and to do their outreach and teach children and teach. A lot of the work that they do is teaching children about the value of education and how to leverage education and how education can open doors for them. And they use the life of Dr. Mays as an example. So the school, the historic site rather, has an endowment that they've been trying to achieve and build up, and they've been kind of a little bit lagging behind in their fundraising. So we decided to come on board and do this project to help build awareness about the legacy of Benjamin Mays, about the historic preservation site, which is located in Greenwood County, and help them raise some money, raise some funds in order to sustain the ongoing operations of the uh, historic preservation site itself. So we decided to do a few documentary projects, which we're working on right now. We've been blessed to have a great team of people working with us. We've actually gotten Louis Gossett Jr. on board. He's done our narration for some of the documentary projects that will be featured on site at the museum itself. And we're working with some top-notch individuals, talent, to create these documentaries that'll be showcased on site there, but as well as other projects that will bring greater awareness to the legacy of Dr. Mays and who he was and why he's such an important figure that we can't forget about. Because I really believe that his teachings are the key to a lot of the things that just fixing a lot of the ailments that we're plagued with right now. I know we're just going through a lot with the pandemic and inflation, crime, just things are there's a lot of compound issues that are going on in the world right now and in our society and in our lives. And I think a lot of those things, Dr. Mays's work and teaching speak to that. And I think that making people aware of that is crucial to just helping us navigate and overcome some of the challenges that we're facing right now in life.
Yeah, it's been an awesome project, and we also have been interviewing a lot of his students and those that knew him personally. And these people, are lawyers, they're doctors, they're teachers,
government officials,
government officials, surgeon generals, past surgeon generals, judges, and so forth. And so it's been an awesome project, just to hear from their perspective of actually being students or just knowing him. I mean, I wish I was around. I mean, I was around when he's still alive, but I mean, I didn't know much about him. But just to hear their stories, to hear their perspective about his life and being in his presence has been inspiring for sure.
Yeah.
So what's next? What's next for you and for the project?
Well, this year we'll be unveiling the documentaries. Lord willing, they'll be on display at the historic preservation site. So that'll be something to look forward to. We hope everybody comes out to support the center, the site, and hope you enjoy this labor of love that we've all kind of poured into over the past year and a half. We've also talked about doing some larger projects based on May's legacy and his life, because I just really feel passionate and I really feel that more people need to know about him, and he's a great example of a human being, of what we should aspire to be. I think a lot of us, and I mean, he walked, like I said, he walked the walk. He did what he needed to do, and he just lived by the values and the virtues of Christianity, and just, I think there's so much that we can learn from him and his life and what he did and what he gave us. So I think it's important that we really share that with other people and make it known. So I'm on board. I'm on the Benjamin Mays train, to get through this. Yeah. So hopefully, we've got a lot of other projects, centered around it. So
yeah, I'm looking forward as well. Like I said, it's been a privilege to work on the project as well, and see his life, being in a lot of ways coming back to life, and for those that don't know him, and I'm definitely excited about the opportunity to be able to share more about his life and how much of an influence that he has on so many different people in all walks of life. Right. I think he, like I said earlier on, I think he was a perfect God dreamer because he not only knew his calling, what God called him to do, but he acted upon it. Right. He didn't just talk about it. He actually made a difference. And the fruit of his labor you see all around him through all these different leaders, through all these changes. I mean, for example, he was responsible for integrating the Atlantic public school system. And so, that nobody, probably a lot of people don't even know about that.
Yeah.
And of course, we talked about MLK and how MLK went on to be a civil rights leader, but a lot of people don't really know about who taught MLK, who mentored him, right? And then so many other people, like I said, Maynard Jackson, Julian Bond. I mean, the names go on. I mean, even Andrew Young, knew him. Wasn't a student of him per se, but he knew him. Hank Aaron, baseball player.
Yeah.
They all were influenced by this one man, and so God kind of blessed him so that he could be, a really great blessing to all those around.
Yeah, he was advisor to the president. So we didn't even talk. There's so much.
Yeah, that's true too.
You forget that that he did so much.
Jimmy Carter, I forgot about that. Yeah, and Kennedy too. So yeah. I'm hoping that if I can get permission to show that short little video that you guys produced. Can I show a little smidgen of it into this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Got to get permission. But yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to show that so you guys, who are watching can see, what Mike, Ron, and the team are working on, and get the snippet of it. And then I'm going to also post the where the museum is and some information about the museum. The website is in the process of changing, so it's going to be updated. But I'll still send you the link to where you can find more information. There are a couple of books out there too that if you want to know more about, I think there's two of them one that I read and then one I'm getting ready to work on by Carrie Dumas, which is another. She worked with Dr. Mays, when he was still alive later on in his life. But there are a couple of books here that you can, I'll put that information in the link as well for those who want to know more. But there's so much about this man, this God dreamer that we can't even cover it in. And we're already in this close to an hour, and there's so much more that is about him in his life that an hour's not enough. But anyway, so Mike, man, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and just being with us, being with us today, sharing about Dr. Mays and the project that you're working on. And definitely appreciative of your time and so forth. So thank you so much.
I'm glad to be here.
So guys, we've come to the close of this episode of God Dreamers. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe, please share with friends and family. Get the word out about what we're doing. Like I said, our desire is to talk about your story, to share your story about purpose, in the hopes that we can inspire others to find and fulfill their God-given purpose, so that we all can collectively make a good change to the world around us, because we all know that there's a lot of craziness going on. And so we all need to know more about Jesus and the goodness of Christ and being a God dreamer as well. So anyway, if you have any questions, please reach out and let me know through social media. You can always, make a note on Facebook or on YouTube in the comment section if you want to have questions or if you'd like to know more about what we're doing. So anyway, you guys take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time around. Take care.